Hello out there. Welcome to Your Next Mission video podcast. The Military Women's Memorial is a one-of-a-kind tribute to America's servicewomen, past and present. Today we'll talk with the President and CEO about a couple of women veterans groups that changed the course of World War I and World War II. You won't want to miss this one. Important history of our country's military. So please stay with us.
Welcome to Your Next Mission video podcast, where we tell the stories of those who have served in the past and those who are serving today. From transition to financial wellness, VA benefits to mental health, we cover issues facing veterans, active military, and their families. Now here's your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks to all of our veterans and service members and families for your service to our great country. Now, before we get started, I personally want to thank our presenting sponsors, Navy Federal Credit Union, whose members are the mission, and Purdue Global, where you can start your comeback, and USAA, whose mission, taking care of the military community and their families always. With additional sponsorship from Blue Cross Blue Shield, FEP Dental, and Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Vision. Together, they make your next mission happen. They love our veterans and families, and if you listen to the show, I say it every week, we love them too. Today, we're going to talk about women's veterans who changed the course of history of our country. And I'm excited. In fact, I'm overwhelmed to welcome to the show, welcome back to the show, the President of Military Women's Memorial, Phyllis J. Wilson, Chief Warrant Officer 5, United States Army, who retired. Welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for coming back on again.
Oh, Jack, I appreciate you so much for allowing us to have the opportunity to visit again and share some stories about military women that, even though we were both in the Army for more than a minute, I can tell you honestly, the whole time I served, I never once heard about these two groups of amazing Army women.
Oh, you know, and I'm excited about listening to it too, because there's a lot of information. I won't tell you, well, I will tell you. I did watch that Netflix flick, and I loved it. And so we need to talk a lot about that. Hey, but first, there's always a fit first with everything. But first, would you tell the audience just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I joined the Army back in the 1980s, aging myself a little bit, and I actually have sons that have retired from the Army already. So yeah, getting up there, but go Army. Joined as a voice intercept operator when we still had an East and West Germany. I went to the language school out in California, in Monterey, to learn German, and then sat and listened to East German military officials and sometimes political leaders to let America know, or our leaders know, what they were perhaps conspiring to do back when we were, Jack, you remember the Fulda Gap in Europe? Yeah, we were all concerned about that. And stayed in so long until we were involved, and I served in Iraq and visited troops in Afghanistan, been to many places, that some which I love dearly, and some it's checked off on the bucket list, never want to go back there again. But the Army gave me so many great opportunities and experiences and education. So can't speak highly enough about the military as an opportunity. Now, perhaps you went in the military thinking you were going to do an entire career. I went in for 4 years, but ended up staying for 37. And most of that was because of the people that I had the opportunity to serve alongside. And so I just kept enjoying myself so much, I stayed in.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny you say that, because I went in 3 years, 30 days, got out, and realized I made the worst mistake of my life and went back in after a couple of years. So, hey, well, first of all, you know, again, thanks for coming on the show. Would you tell the audience, you know, about the Military Women's Memorial, you know, when it started, you know, and what the mission is?
Yeah. So actually, back in the 1980s, Congress approved the creation of a military women's memorial in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And then the hunt was on where to actually locate it. And they went to 8 different locations around the National Mall in Washington, D.C. But ultimately, the site that was chosen was a retaining wall at the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery. But that retaining wall, which was the ceremonial entrance to Arlington, built in the 1930s, was sort of left to fall into a state of disrepair. It was not a handsome looking front wall. Design competition happened in the 1990s, and in 1995, ground was broken and dug out 33,000 square feet at the entrance to Arlington National Cemetery to build the Military Women's Memorial. The Clintons were there for groundbreaking in 95, and then because they were traveling overseas on state official business in October of 1997, the Vice President, Al Gore, and Tipper Gore were there as our keynote for the opening day of the Military Women's Memorial. Now, out front of the memorial, there were over 40,000 people. Many of them were World War II women, who we're going to speak a little bit more about them later. And two women, Jack, 1997, two women from World War I that were there, and one of them spoke. Her name was Frida Hardin. She served in the Navy in World War I, and she said that day in 1997, when I served in the Navy, women were not even allowed to vote. Yet she raised her hand and served this country and really probably helped lead the change that just a couple of years after she served, the women were afforded the opportunity to vote in this country. And so we think it was really the World War I women, but I had always been told that only the sea services, the Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard, had allowed women in to serve in World War I, and there were no Army women permitted. But I've since learned that's not true.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Huh. Hey, today, I didn't. Tell me a little bit about that. When did they let them in? I mean, if you said it wasn't true, did they have women in the Army then?
Yeah, so the Army Nurse Corps was created in 1901, but they were very different. They were not part of the Army.
Yeah.
They wore the long white starched dresses down to the ankles, the caps, the whole bit, and they were not addressed by rank ever. They were called Miss or Nurse only, and so it was a relative rank, and they were kept very separate and apart from the regular Army. And then the Navy created their Navy Nurse Corps in 1908, so well before World War I. So those were standing corps but still not really part of the Navy or the Army. But through a sneaky loophole of the Navy Reserve, that was the only branch that said that in order to join, you had to be a U.S. citizen. Everything else said a male and a U.S. citizen. So the Secretary of the Navy, through that loophole, brought in over 10,000 women into the Navy Reserve, immediately mobilized them, activated them, and they served active duty during World War I. And a few, just hundreds, served in the Marine Corps, and a handful, dozens, in the Coast Guard. But the Army was completely resistant to it all. But it turns out that when General Pershing over in Europe is demanding a certain skill set, the only ones that could do it was a cohort of AT&T trained women switchboard operators. And he kept basically pounding the table with his fist saying, send them over. And so AT&T trained these bilingual French and English women, 223, whom went overseas to France and served everything from training the guys in the trenches on the front lines on how to work the first, if you will, field phones, to send comms back to battalions and ultimately to the headquarters where Pershing was at. And so this was the group of people that General Pershing attributes, these few women, to probably shortening the length of World War I by at least a full year. So think of the thousands, if not potentially 1 million lives saved by that war ending sooner than later.
I can see another show coming after this one, but that's incredible. But first, I tell you what, I want to focus. I think we want to focus on two incredible groups that really changed the course of history, and that was the 688 Women's Battalion of World War II, and also the Hello Girls of World War II. World War I, I'm sorry, but World War I. Let's start with the 688 Battalion, which has been getting, as you know, a lot of well-deserved attention lately, and I said it just a minute ago, from Netflix special, which I watched, and I thought it was an incredible show. Would you talk about them?
Yeah, so we have been working for years on the 6888. It was the 6888, so three eights in a row makes it
Hmm.
six, and then triple eight, because you
Hmm.
know how in the military we don't want to have to say those numbers any different. So
I
six
couldn't
triple
remember
eight Central Postal Directory Battalion, and so like many women that served in World War II era, they served for a couple of years and then they went on with their lives. So these group of women, mostly African American, a few that were Hispanic and or like their dad was Mexican, their mother was African American. They were all lumped into this one battalion of 855 women. And they were shipped overseas after a lot of cajoling. And they took a lot, even from the White House. Ultimately, the pressure was applied to get these women shipped overseas. And the leadership in the Army thought they were giving them a complete no hope whatsoever of completing the mission. You were going to fail. Absolutely. Other units had tried and failed, and these women were hell-bent for leather. They were not going to fail on this mission. So they arrived to backloads, warehouses, airplane hangars completely filled to the rafters with bags of mail, both those that were coming out of the front lines back to the States, just stacked up and never sorted and shipped back to the States. And likewise, even perhaps more importantly, all of these men that were just suffering through the Battle of the Bulge, freezing in the winter of 1944-45, and were not receiving any letters from home. It was their only communication. So they're wondering, why am I not hearing from my wife, my girlfriend, my mother, my dad, anybody? Nobody's writing to me. What's happening? And so morale had gotten very low. These women showed up and came up with a incredible system of how to sort the mail. And it wasn't like it is today, folks, with zip codes and all of those things. People had written it was to Bubba Smith, Europe, and that was the only address on there.
Yeah.
So fortunately, they devised this ingenious methodology, but they were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to try to clear this backlog, 17 million pieces of mail to clear it. And so in 2022, with not just us, certainly at the Military Women's Memorial, but some great Army leaders, one an Army Colonel, Colonel Cummings, Edna Cummings, and Master Sergeant Elizabeth Helm Fraser. These were two women that spearheaded up on Capitol Hill the effort to get the Congressional Gold Medal, which was won and signed in 2022 by the president, giving the 6888 the Congressional Gold Medal for their incredible work that they did, not only in England sorting those mails. Once they had done that successfully, you know, the Army, do something really well, you're going to get another less than ideal assignment. And they were shipped to France to also now clear up the incredible backlog of mail there. And at Normandy American Cemetery, there are only 4 American women buried there. And Normandy Cemetery, I'm sure you've been, Jack, it's gorgeous. Thousands of grave markers out there. Only 4 women, American women, are buried there. And 3 of those 4 women are, in fact, Black women from the 6888. So it's kind of, and I never knew that. And though every time I visited Normandy, I never crossed my mind as a soldier that there were female soldiers buried there, because it really didn't dawn on me that they had served in Europe. I knew about the nurses, but that was about all I knew. So what these women have done, we've had like Kerry Washington, who plays the commanding officer in the film. Tyler Perry wrote and directed the film. So it's been really interesting to watch how this storyline has gone sort of viral to make sure everybody knows. Now, there are some poetic license, if you will, taken by Tyler when he wrote the film. But all in all, it's reasonably accurate. It's a good story.
Yeah, I was when I was listening to the story first, I thought it was an incredible story, but I had a dealing with mail myself one time when I was in Bosnia. We had a problem where God, I'm going to say there was like 50 bags of mail that had got caught up in Christmas. They wasn't shipping out, and the general came to me and said, "Hey, Sergeant Major, would you go down to see what the problem is, mail?" And I said, "Yeah." So I went down there and they showed me all this stuff, and I said, "Okay." well, what unit is it? And so they told me all the units. So I just put them in a Humvee, throw them in the back of a Black Hawk, took them out there and just put them out on the ground. They said, but Sergeant Major, you don't have a mail handling card. I said, I don't care. We're going to take them anyway. So that was, again, that was a great story. It's about history. And sometimes we forget about the kind of things that went on. The other thing I tell you, I was really disappointed. I got not disappointed is the way that they treated them. The 6 Triple. I mean, it was, I guess a lot older, but at the time, I never seen much of that when I was in the military. And it really bothered me a little bit to see how Army people was treating that organization. Because there was a good organization. They wanted to do a good job, and so that really anyway. But they turned around at the end of the show. They turned around and said, you are doing a good job, and they give them the proper respect. So I like that part too.
They get applause from white men in the military when they realized that the mail had been cleared, and they were actually, the 6 888 was getting ready to depart England, and somebody hollered at the train station, excuse me, are you the 6 888? Because they're the only Black women in uniform. And the commanding officer turned and said, yes, we are. To which all of the soldiers around them pop to attention and render salutes to this group of Black women that have been treated miserably. The working conditions, one, but two, just even when they do lose members of their unit, that the Army is unwilling to take care of their funerals and so forth. So they had to pass their helmets or hats around to raise the money to ensure that these women were provided a proper burial. So to get that salute and then the applause at the end sort of woke them up a little bit to what they had done was in fact incredibly important. But a lot of men and women that are not what we call the operators in particular in the Army, they minimize their work. But the ratio is either, I've heard it all kinds of numbers, 1 to 12 up to 1 to 20. For every operator guy on the front line, there's 10, 12, 20 people behind the scenes that are making sure, from logistics and chow and supplies, everything that goes into it, the intelligence, all of the things that are needed to make sure that person goes out there and comes back home again. But those people behind the scenes tend to marginalize and completely minimize the incredible work that they've done to make sure that person or team went out and came back safely. And we've got to stop doing that. I think that's a huge downfall that we have allowed to perpetuate itself, that you're only cool if you're the guy that's out there doing, the shooting or the safeguarding. And sometimes we all know chow's incredibly important. Intelligence work is incredibly important. And now we know that mail made a huge difference, especially in that era.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I remember when I was in Germany one time that they was jumping all over the mechanics about something, treating them really sort of badly. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. If your vehicle breaks down, are you going to fix it? Are you going to get it done? And so they said, no. I said, so, most people, I didn't say suck up, but they'd always make sure they was friends with the dining facility manager and the mail, all those people. I think the majority of people know now how important it is. And I also think the number's about 1 to 10 or 1 to 12, like you just said a minute ago. The other thing I'll tell you is that they don't have mail anymore. They usually do email and all the rest of the stuff. But I remember when I was just in Vietnam that when I got a letter, it was a major event. I mean, I was always waiting for that one piece of mail, whether or not they said, hey, how are you doing, what's going on? And it took so long to get to you. And if you waited a couple weeks or a month or so without a letter, you sort of be depressed a little bit. And the second thing is, you would take that letter, I'd put it in a 50 caliber can, and I'd read it probably 3 or 4 times, so it was important. That's for doggone sure.
Absolutely. That's what I love, is we have really been trying to uplift these stories that I thought, I served in the Army for decades, and I never once heard about the women of the 6 888. And so I've watched the film 4 times. I have needed tissues every stinking time because I know now what's about to happen. And part of it is when I get really angry about something, where it hurts my heart. I still tear up over it. And it just, to your point, it was a different era. It was the 1940s. I'm not justifying it. I'm just simply stating it was Jim Crow era. These women, God bless their souls, that they were willing to join an army and serve a nation that maybe didn't serve them terribly well, but they were doggone determined they were going to not only do their mission, they were going to do it incredibly well. And they certainly did.
I tell you the other thing, when I look at movies like that, I go back and I think of a couple of things. One is how much we've changed.
Yes.
How much forward we've moved. We've really changed a lot. And I think a lot of people, the things that, they did 30, 40 years ago or whatever, we've sort of come out of that. We're moving in the right direction. So that's a good news story. And I think you can look at what we did back then, but also you need to think about what we're currently doing now. Let's make it better and better and better for all of us. Hey, we got to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk about Hello Girls and the impact they had in World War I. So don't you go anywhere. I'll be right back. This is Your Next Mission video podcast with me, your host, Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army. If you're enjoying this discussion, and I know that you are because we're talking about changes in the history of our women in the military, and it's a great story, so you got to listen. Please like us. Click on that subscribe button below, and be sure to click on the bell to receive notifications of all of our upcoming video podcast releases. I'll be right back after word from our presenting sponsors.
You're watching Your Next Mission video podcast, proudly presented by Navy Federal Credit Union, the most trusted credit union owned by members of the military community, serving all branches of the armed forces and their families. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Their members are the mission. Purdue Global. You're ready for a comeback, and with Purdue Global, you can do more than take classes. You can take charge of your story, of your career, of your life. Earn a degree you can be proud of and get an education employers respect. Start your comeback at purdueglobal.edu. And USAA.
A promise is a trust not to be broken, whether spoken with an oath or sealed with a pinky. And after 100 years, we're still taking care of the military community and their families. That's our mission, always.
Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack L. Tilley.
Welcome back. We're talking with the President of Military Women's Memorial, Phyllis J. Wilson, Chief Warrant Officer 5, U.S. Army retired. Before we get back to our discussion, I want to let you know about a way you can support the work we're doing on behalf of veterans and their families here at the American Freedom Foundation. If you have a used vehicle you're planning to get rid of, or property you don't have any plans for, you can donate it. Visit our website at AmericanFreedomFoundation.org/donate and click on that vehicle donation button or the home donation button to support our work. We really, really, really would appreciate your support. Phyllis, Chief, I can't get out of calling you Phil. I got to call you Chief or something. I just feel so uncomfortable doing that. But let's go back to what we was talking about before, the Hello Girls in World War I. Carried out a very important mission to serve our troops. Would you talk some more about that?
Absolutely. Another group that I never heard of in all the time I was in, which it's kind of fun in a way. I've met some of the daughters and granddaughters of these Hello Girls, these women, intrepid women. They had to be French and English speakers, trained by AT&T to run the switchboards. And one of the things that was happening over in France, in particular with General Pershing in World War I, was that the American men that were doing the connections, they were taking nearly a minute to make the switchboard connections to connect calls from the front lines back to a headquarters that could help a team, a unit that was being outflanked, outmaneuvered, whatever the case would be. They could actually call another unit by the field phones and get them over there to reinforce much quicker and save thousands and thousands of lives, perhaps. So he had heard that these women this was like the prime plum job here in the United States in 1917, 1918, a college educated woman that was a young gal that was looking for a viable, proper position was a switchboard operator, maybe even a supervisor of a bank of women that were running these. And so this young woman by the name of Grace Banker, at the age of 25, college educated, applied for one of the slim positions opportunities that they were all across the newspapers asking women that were bilingual to sign up. And over 7,000 women answered the request. Initially, they were only looking for 100 women to answer this call, but they trained them, they shipped them over. They arrived in March of 1918 and went straight to work. Their barracks were bombed the very first night they were in town in France, and they were ready to go to work the next morning. Said, "Put us in, coach, we're ready." And they worked incredibly hard and connected millions and millions of calls and did it much faster, on average 5 to 7 seconds to connect a call, as opposed to prior, mostly men, taking 55 seconds. So the issue is, and we'll just say this, is women are better at multitasking on average, not always, and guys tend to work, they want to work on one issue, project, and then move to the next. And so when you have a switchboard with 20, 30, 40 calls coming in, it can become overwhelming. But as a mom myself, I can have a child patting my mom, patting my leg, mom. Well, I'm still thinking about, what are we having for dinner tonight? What clothes are clothes in the dryer? Oh, I have to remember to pick something up at the store, all at the same time. And so I think that's why just the wiring of our brains made it a little bit better for us to do that. But it was a really amazing unit that went over. They had to purchase their own uniforms. They were treated as officers. They wore Signal Corps insignia on their headgear. But when they came back in 1920, because they were some of the last troops to return from France, because the comms was so important all the way to the end, they came back in 1920 and were promptly told, "You weren't in the Army. No, women were not in the Army. You were a contract." And they said, "We never signed contracts." And they fought and fought until 1977. And so when we think about President Jimmy Carter, who's recently passed away, he actually is the one that signed into law giving the Hello Girls of World War I. In 1977, he signs it, giving them veteran status ultimately. Many had already passed away, but those that were still alive, the Army did right by them to a degree and went out to visit each of them, sending a general officer to every one of their homes and provided them with their honorable discharge documents. One lady took the document when she received it. Media was there, the press was there. She kissed the discharge document that she had, and then she turned and looked at the general and said, "Where's my back pay?"
I don't blame her. I don't blame her a bit. I mean, I don't know how much that would be, but, and when you talk, that's a great story, because when you talk about multitasking, all the time I'm thinking about my wife. I've been married a long time, and I know women do multitask. Mothers multitask, that's for sure. But I was thinking about my granddaughter. One of them has three babies. The other one has two. And I remember I was over there the other day, and they're 8, 6, and about a year old. And she's sorting all this stuff out, and I'm thinking, Lord, I couldn't do that. And then the last thing I'll tell you is my wife one time, years ago, said, "I need a break. I'm going to take a couple-week break and go on vacation, go see my parents." I said, "Oh, yeah, go ahead. I can take care of everything." She was gone probably 24 hours. My kids were calling her, saying, "Mom, when you coming home? We need you here." Because they'd come to me and says, "Hey, Dad, I need a sandwich." I said, "Go make it. What do you ask me for? Go make your own sandwich." Oh, Lord, have mercy. So after about 3 days, I called, "Look, I love you, baby. Would you come back?" Hey, I understand now that the women's military memorial. I mean, you keep these. How do you? Oh, I guess my question is, how do you keep these stories alive? So people, I mean, like, I'm an old guy and I've been around a long time. I haven't heard most of them. So what are we doing to keep them alive?
That's a great question. That really is the heart and soul of the Military Women's Memorial. Well, it is like a museum inside, and we start by telling these stories of women all the way back to the Revolutionary War, when they disguised themselves as a man, because it was absolutely not done back in the 1770s to pick up a weapon and wear trousers and still be a female. So we tell those stories to the Civil War with Dr. Mary Walker, so far the only woman to date to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor, all through the Spanish-American War, but not just war times, as it became more and more common for women to serve, and that really was World War II. That was the genesis. But even in World War II, women, except the nurses, could serve only for the wartime plus 6 months, and they all were discharged until 1948, when President Truman signed into law the allowance that women could in fact stay in and have a career in the military, but we couldn't be more than 2% of the military. If you got pregnant, you were automatically discharged, and we had a rank limit of 05. So there were those kind of things, and that held true through the 50s and 60s. But one of the things that we did is we were building the memorial. Our founder, Brigadier General, U.S. Air Force retired Wilma Vaught, who very soon will be 95 years old, when she was helping to create the memorial, she was a comptroller and she understood databasing. So in the 80s and 90s, she actually created the initial database system here at the Military Women's Memorial. And it has now grown into a Salesforce-based platform that has over 321,000 discrete individual stories in our database. Like every one of the Hello Girls, all 223 of those, all 855 of the 6888 women, and obviously about 320,000 more. But there's more than 3 million women that have served this country. So that means there's a lot of them that have not taken the time to put their story and a memorable experience into our database. It looks like a big baseball card when it's all said and done. Their photo, their years of service, their branch of service, but it's those memorable experience section that is really the most, they make my heart sing when I get to read what was so important to them. That was their most memorable experiences of their time in service. Now, be mindful that until the last 30, 40 years, most women did not have a career. They served for a couple of years, and as soon as they became pregnant, they were discharged, or they could take the chapter discharge even once it was permitted to stay. That happened to me in the 1980s when I became pregnant. Initially, my commander, who was used to working only with men, he had heard that women had to be discharged, but by then the rules had changed, but we could still, if you wanted to depart, there was an easy due to pregnancy discharge, but I didn't want to do that. I had signed up for 4 years. I felt like I could do those 4 years, and then did a lot more than that. But yeah, so that's what we do. Is the database is the most important thing, and it's super easy on our website, womensmemorial.org, womensmemorial.org, top right. All you have to do is create an account, and Jack, you can create one yourself. Men, women, served or not, create an account. And once you're in there, inside of your account, there's a section that says find a servicewoman, somebody you've served with, one of the other sergeant majors or somebody, or put in Charity Adams Early, or a cool name like, read about Marilyn Monroe. Why is she in our database? She never was in the military. But all of the USO performers that went into combat zones and were issued Department of Defense ID cards, Geneva category codes, the whole bit, they're eligible to put their stories in for their service. So Brooke Shields, Marilyn Monroe, Martha Ray, Julia Child, who did serve in World War II. There's so many great stories, and it's just a question of, asking people to tell your story, because I can't tell yours if I don't know about it.
Yeah, one thing, all the time you're talking, I'm thinking, I know we have a History Channel on television. It's too bad we don't have more things like this on the History Channel. Are you guys approaching that to try to put more things about the women's time in service on History Channel?
Yeah, we would love to. So let's partner up there, Jack, because we have a very
I don't know what I
team.
can do about it, but I'll certainly support you.
You could help. We have 20 staff members that work at the memorial, which by law, because it's a national memorial created by Congress, it's open 7 days a week, 9 to 5 every day except Sunday, noon to 5. And so we have to staff and man that, but we also have the foundation, which raises the money to operate and maintain that beautiful memorial, as well as to maintain the largest collection in the world of military women's artifacts, from letters to stories and uniforms. We have the uniform on display at the Military Women's Memorial of the commanding officer, Charity Adams, of the 688. So in October, Kerry Washington, who played Charity in the film, was at the Women's Memorial. And when she saw the uniform, it moved her to tears. But she also got to meet Charity Adams' children. She has a son and a daughter, and they had already seen previews of the film. And so for Kerry Washington, the actress, to meet the actual children of Charity Adams, it was a very special moment to witness. And that's what we really get to do, is bring history back to life, but also women today, currently serving women, can put their stories into our national database. Don't wait until you're no longer in or deceased. It's a living memorial. Put your stories in there and let us help to amplify what you're doing today. You're changing history every minute that you're serving in uniform. And I don't know if you saw, Jack, I just saw in the newspaper that one of the key reasons why the Army met their recruiting goals last year
More women.
was they had a significant increase, 18% increase in women joining over the year prior. So we're doing something right.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, that's really good. One thing I want to tell you is one of the things I talk sometimes with other people that want to market their product, and that's what you're doing, marketing and telling people about the Women's Memorial. Make sure you just don't have women up there talking. Get males in there to talk about the women's stuff and how, because I can think of a lot of great stories that I can talk about or have talked about to different people about people or women that I've served with in the military that really had an effect on my life, that really sort of changed my attitude about a lot of things, about women in combat and everything else we're going to talk about in a few minutes. This has been a great discussion. As always, it's always a good discussion. We have to take a short break. I want to talk about the role of women in the military when we come back. So think about that for just a second. I'll be right back. Now, here's a word from one more of the organizations that make this show possible.
You're watching Your Next Mission video podcast, brought to you in part by Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Dental, Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Vision.
Part of transitioning out is that dental and vision insurance breaks off from your medical insurance.
Vision and dental is very important to be able to enjoy your retirement.
Blue Cross Blue Shield makes the transition so much easier.
Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack L. Tilley.
Welcome back. We're blessed to be here today with the President of the Military Women's Memorial, Phyllis J. Wilson, Chief Warrant Officer 5, U.S. Army retired. Remember, this is your show. We know there's so many issues that directly affect you, and we want to address each and every one of them. So please, as I've said many times, reach out to me. Tell me what topics you'd like us to cover. You can call or text me at 844-424-1134, or send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. And guess what? I'll reach back out to you. Chief, Phyllis, whatever you want me to call you, I'm going to call you the right name. This has been a lot to talk lately about the role of women in the military, especially in combat. What do you think the role should be of women in combat?
Oh, that's a loaded question there.
That's a big question right there.
It's a huge question, and again, what people think of with regards to women in combat. Yes, I've been in combat zones, but I have never been, I would have, had I needed to, pulled a trigger and I would have easily, no problem in engaging the enemy. It's us or them, and I'm all about safeguarding the people to my left and right. But as an intel soldier, I did get to deploy with special operations units, and so there was plenty of really well-qualified shooters around me that I never felt that I needed to, nor was I asked to do so. Would have had, if we'd been overrun or something, that would have been completely different. But I mean, I've met some of the families of a couple of our fallen women, our cultural support team women that trained. They're just the cream of the crop, the best of the best. The cultural support team women went and did direct action and dealt with village operations in Afghanistan in particular, with Rangers, Green Berets, other assets like that. And two of them, Ashley White and Jennifer Moreno, laid down their lives just like their male counterparts did on the same days. And so when I talk with the families about that, they're immensely proud of what their daughters have done. Neither of them were married nor had children. And so to talk with the parents to learn about that, they knew eyes wide open, these young women, that they were going into combat arenas. Another young woman that you think about it, she's a combat medic. And Jessica Ellis, young girl, second deployment in Iraq, went out and died on Mother's Day, 2008. By an IED. So there's all of these things. It's like, what is combat? What isn't combat? We're in combat zones. I think we've shown our value, our worth, our abilities to pony up and do what is necessary. And sometimes, no matter where you are, wrong place, wrong time, you may lay down your life for this country. And I think there's nothing greater or nobler than that. Obviously, I prefer if we all came home, but war is such that it's a given. Some will not come home intact. And so we have to get our arms around that as a nation. How are we doing with the ideas that like I said, 100 years ago, women were being marginalized and minimized. And now we have proven we can go to combat, we can go to war and come home and provide all of the services that our male counterparts can do. The one thing that I will say, this is me purely as an individual, not as the president of the Military Women's Memorial, but given, had I had the opportunities that now I see is available to our younger women, oh yes, I'd been all in completely. But the wisdom of age also tells me that there are times we have to look at things a little bit more pragmatically. And I think that that's part of the conversation that this country deserves to be able to have without devolving into negative terms, negative language. We should just be able to talk about all of the implications and ramifications of what it means when we do send men and women to war, and what does that mean? How do we prepare for it, Jack? That's the question.
Yeah. As you were talking, I wrote down a couple. One is that I sat on a board on TRADOC that talked about whether or not women should be in combat. At the time they was working all that stuff, and they all talked around. There's just a couple of enlisted guys in there, but I said, hey, look, the bottom line is, do you meet the standard? Can you meet the standard? If you meet the standard, allow them to be in combat if they want to be in combat. And I'm okay with that. But the one thing that has always bothered me a little bit, but I'd work through it if I was still on active duty, is seeing just because of how I grew up in life, seeing a woman on the battlefield dead, and have to put them in a body. I would just absolutely, that made me even madder, and I'd probably be a little, I'd be mad. I think everybody around would be mad and not sure what to do. And then the last thing is, and one of the things I don't think we'll know for a long time, maybe now, we talked about it on the prep call a little bit, is what's the effect of carrying all the additional weight and all that stuff in combat? And how that's going to affect you from, having kids later down the road. Maybe you don't want to have kids when you first come in or something like that. That's the only issues that I have. And that's just, oh God, I'm sure we can work through all of those. But the one thing I think is one that we really have to address is what's the effect of women in combat after carrying all the loads and doing all the stuff that, males are doing right now. I mean, I don't hear anybody talking about that. What do you think about that? Or those issues anyway?
The Secretary of Defense advisory board called DACOWITS, the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Service. It was created in 1951. And so they have had over 100 key recommendations that have been implemented over those past decades. And they're still in place. They're still looking hard at these kind of things. And I will tell you that certainly, me jumping out of airplanes and doing things. When I joined the Army, I weighed 104 pounds. When I was jumping out of airplanes, I weighed about 115. And so many times my kit weighed as much as I did when I'm waddling out to an airplane to get ready to jump, right? Especially if it
I
was
can
full
imagine. Yeah, yeah.
combat equipment, long gone the whole bit. So there are those things. I think technology is going to help us tremendously in the future, carbon fiber and other things. And also, one of the things we still haven't gotten right, Jack, is fitted equipment to fit our, we're all created differently. There should be a way by now that we can, 3D, 4D engineer equipment that fits us properly, that doesn't give us chinks in our armor, as you call it, or that can be created with such lightweight graphic and carbon fiber equipment that still stops bullets, still does what it's supposed to do, but takes the bulk of the weight off from us. And again, one of the issues we always had was how many batteries we've had to carry in our rucks when we're downrange. And so how do we come up with that kind of technology that will preclude us from having to carry that extra 40, 50, 60 pounds, and male or female? But the issue that I'm an RN as a clinician on my civilian side, is when I look at women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, childbearing years, our pelvises are created in a way that it's meant to be pliable, to give, so that when you do bear a child, the pelvis can yield to bearing of that 8-9 pound baby. Because it is a malleable, pliable pelvis, when you put 50, 60, 70, 100 pounds for hours, and then still, we're not standing still, we're out there doing, moving for miles and miles and miles on that frame, what does it do? And we don't yet have enough longitudinal data over decades to know what that means. But I really have to believe that technology is going to be our best friend to all of us, male and female, because we have to look at how broken we are at the end of our military service. And then we go to the Department of Veterans Affairs and we file for, our rating, and we're shocked at the higher level. And this country cannot afford, should not. We should be able to come up with a technology that makes sure that most of us can end our, 6, 8, 20 years of military service without being, knees, hips, ankles, shoulders, back in such bad condition. There's got to be a better way. And I think that that's one of the challenges for the future, and for some of our young people coming up, is to come up with these solution sets.
Yeah, I was a tanker in the military, and I remember watching guys jump off tanks all the time, jumping off tanks, and I would always slide down the front slope and sort of, and they said, why do you do that? I said, man, eventually that's got to hurt, so I don't want to do that. So I didn't ever jump off. I sort of took it nice and easy. Hey, first of all, let me say, this has been a great discussion. And I know you have a very special event that's coming up March 19th. Would you tell us a little bit about this event that's coming up on March 19th?
Well, with help from great groups like the Doughboy Foundation, World War I, Centennial Commission, the American Legion, and so many others, we worked up on Capitol Hill all last year. More visits than I like to make to Capitol Hill, to be honest with you, but it was a worthwhile cause. And that was to ensure, and just 2 weeks ago, at the last week of December 2024, was signed into law, the Congressional Gold Medal for that group of stalwart linguists and switchboard operators, the Hello Girls of World War I. We're going to host a reception inside the Military Women's Memorial, bringing family members of those Hello Girls that for the first 60 years after they served were told, no, you were not in the Army, you are not veterans. So now not only have they gotten veteran status, now the Congressional Gold Medal. None of the Hello Girls are still living, but the medallion that will be created will go on all their grave markers. And then ultimately there'll be a big event, probably a year from now, up on Capitol Hill, awarding the actual real Congressional Gold Medal. So Elizabeth Cobbs, who wrote an amazing book called The Hello Girls, will be there. Jim Theris, who works for the National Cemetery Administration, one arm of the Department of Veterans Affairs, he did a documentary 5, 6, 7 years ago on the Hello Girls. He'll be there, and we'll be showing some excerpts of that, but you can find the Hello Girls documentary. Jim Theres, Theres is his last name. Find that one. It's about an hour long. He also had done one about 6 years ago on the 6888. So he's been a great friend of championing these incredible stories, and is part of the reason I even know anything about them. So we're going to have a lot of the military and veteran service organizations, elected officials that were involved in sponsoring the Congressional Gold Medal for the Hello Girls, and so many other just people that are excited to finally see this, and the families that realize what their moms, their grandmothers, their great grandmothers did had a tremendous impact on not just the United States, but Europe. So you think about what this young lady did getting on a ship and going overseas. Pretty inspiring to me that we have all this technology now and we take it all for granted, but I can't imagine what it must have been like to leave your home in the States in 1918 and go over to France, to a war-torn country that had been in turmoil since 1914. So it was already in bad shape, and they get over there and they just want to serve, and they did it. And now they're finally, their families know, America knows about them. And I think that's really important.
You know, first of all, let me tell you, it's so much fun talking to you because you're just a wealth of knowledge, and you can really see the motivation and the dedication that you have just telling people about your story. So please keep doing what you're doing, because I certainly think you're making a tremendous difference in the lives of so many people. I just, from this old soldier, I just thank you for what you do. Is there somewhere people can go that want to learn more about the Women's Memorial, or even donate, if they want to donate something to Women's Memorial? Where would they go?
Money. That's the thing. People think we are federally funded because we're a national memorial, and we're not. Now, all of the other memorials here in the Washington, D.C. area are open air. They don't have an inside like the Military Women's Memorial does. So hundreds of honor flights that come to Washington, D.C. have their luncheon inside the Military Women's Memorial, where it's heated or cooled, depending on the time of year when they're here.
Yeah.
And we also have really nice, large public restrooms, and it makes it very helpful, especially for the honor flight guests that come to us in wheelchairs. So to be able to access our handicapped or ADA accessible restrooms in a more comfortable environment than it is, you're out in a national park ranger station kind of a venue. So we love having people visit us, certainly online at womensmemorial.org. Again, there's a donate button on the homepage, but you can learn so much more about what we do. We also have our own YouTube channel, lots of stories like this. You can just go to YouTube and search Military Women's Memorial. We'll come right up. And again, like Jack says, subscribe to it. And then you'll know when we're hosting a new video out there. We're on all the social media platforms except TikTok under Military Women's Memorial. And certainly on our website, there's a lot of tabs out there. You can see what our upcoming events will be. We host a number of free events to the public, open to the public all over the place. And a lot of people use us for their promotion ceremonies, their retirement ceremonies, and many families that have somebody that is being laid to rest at Arlington, they'll have their after funeral memorial ceremony reception inside the Military Women's Memorial, because we're right there. And it really is a lovely place, especially if you go up on our rooftop terrace. So there's lots to learn. Go to womensmemorial.org, create an account, whether you've served or not, man or woman. We really have a big push this year to see if we can reach 25,000 new accounts this year. So Jack, tag, you're one of those 25,000 new ones. Go in there. Takes less than 30 seconds to create an account. And then some evening when you're dumpster diving, go put in one of those sergeant majors you served with. It was a woman, and see if her story's in there. And if it isn't, go get on her case and tell her she needs to put it in there. If you know somebody that is no longer living, but she served, go into your account, find that service woman. If she's not there, tag you're it. Somebody else. We don't know all of these 2.7 million women out there that have served. We want you to find a photo of her and put in the memorable experiences, a shared experience that you had, but tell her story. Don't let her die. she's gone, but she doesn't have to be gone forever. Our database is open to the public. You come into the memorial, it shows on a large screen. You put that story card up there. It's stunning, and it brings people to tears when they see that their loved one, a colleague, their grandmother. Just had somebody the other day came in and said, hey, my great aunt, she served, and I'm pretty sure she's in here. And we went there and looked it up, and there she was. And they were quite excited to see this Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, not an Air Force Chief Master Sergeant, not this. Only Joanne Bass has done that. And I saw Joanne was just recently on your meeting here as well. So Jack, what you do is important to make sure these stories are heard by more people, and that they know there is a National Military Women's Memorial that's waiting to receive all of these stories.
No, not from. Hey, first of all, let me tell you that every time I talk to you, I'm just so motivated because you love what you're doing and you're making a big difference, and I certainly appreciate it. Any final thoughts, anything that you want to share with the audience that maybe you missed?
Just say, this is a big year. This is 2025. This is the 250th anniversary of the Army, 250th anniversary of the Navy, and the Marine Corps. So we've got some great stories to tell. One last thing that we're going to be highlighting later this year is, in fact, that the service academies, West Point, Air Force, and the Navy, all had to open their doors starting this year, 2025, to accept applications to the incoming class of 1976. So it's the 50th anniversary of women being afforded the opportunity to apply to go to service academies. And we're gonna tell more about that later this year. Because again, when I joined the Army, I was blissfully ignorant that women had just barely been entering into and graduating out of the service academies. So who knew, right? I guess I always just presupposed it never dawned on me that women weren't given the same opportunities. So it's good for young people to still know that the times have changed, and we're going to continue to see them change into the future.
Absolutely. First of all, let me say again, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're a wealth of knowledge and just a very motivated and enthusiastic person that has given so much back to the military, and I certainly appreciate it. So again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Have a great day, SMA.
You too. Thank you. Thanks again to Chief Warrant Officer 5, retired Phyllis Wilson, for being with us. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, and you've been enjoying Your Next Mission video podcast. And thank you for joining us. Log on to our website at yournextmission.org and leave me a review. Hopefully it's a good review. While you're there, you can visit our nonprofit and corporate partners who have jobs and services available that can assist you in your transition from the military. And check out our job board with partnership with Recruit Military and Upline, where you can create your own personal profile that will match you with just the right job in real time. You can follow me on my personal social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble. And if you like what we're doing at Your Next Mission, please click on that subscribe button below. And don't forget to click on the bell to receive notifications about our upcoming video podcasts. Remember, we want to hear from you. Please leave me a message or send me a text at 844-424-1134. Send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. Thanks again to Phyllis for joining us today. And I tell you that, the Women's Memorial is a wonderful place to visit if you've never been there. We need to tell our history about what kind of sacrifices our women have made for our country and for our military. So if you're in D.C., please go visit the Women's Memorial. And if you want to donate too, because we need to learn as much about the women's history as we can. So thank you for watching today. And thanks to New Mind Studios and, of course, our sponsors, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue Global, USAA, Blue Cross Blue Shield FPP Dental, and Blue Cross Blue Shield FPP Vision. We appreciate all you do for our military. And as always, see you on the high ground. Hooah!
You've been listening to Your Next Mission, brought to you by the American Freedom Foundation. Learn more by visiting yournextmission.org.